Okay.
So the book that we are referring to is called The Critique of Pure Reason from Immanuel Kant. But this certain edition is has been translated by Norman Kemp Smith, and for this session we are going to look at the Transcendental Doctrine of Elements, especially with its first part, the Transcendental Aesthetic.
Yes. So if we look at the table of contents, so initially, there are many editions and there is talk about the first and second edition and all. But really interesting is the introduction, the distinction between pure and empirical knowledge. I think Kant wanted to create a theory around pure knowledge in the sense the knowledge which is not given through the senses. I think Kant really did not like senses, not sensibility. I would not say he did not like sensibility. I think he really appreciated sensibility because he created this idea of self-conscious, the idea of I through sensibility. So yes, so the distinction between pure and empirical knowledge is also quite an interesting one. And the second is we are in possession of certain modes of a priori knowledge, and even the common understanding is never without them. So yes, so a priori knowledge is something that you have built in your mind in order to even start knowing about the world, knowing about the things in the physical world. So I think so I think this is what he means to say. And philosophy.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
No, it's because in the preface of the A edition, because he brings in this issue that he has with reason, which is that that through reason we are trying to come up with all these questions which we are not even able to answer, and he's trying to construct this issue of the transcendental, which is that the metaphysics that has come previous to his work, it has always tried to cross the limits of reason, like whatever certain limits it has, the under which the questions that it can only answer. But for him, the metaphysics previous to him have crossed those limits and have indulged in talking about things that cannot be really known. So he's also bringing this
things that cannot be objectively verified. Yes.
Yes. And that's why, as you have mentioned, like there is this distinction in knowledge which is analytic and synthetic. And yeah.
Yes, we will get to that. Philosophy stands in need of a science to determine the possibility, the principles, and the extent of all a priori knowledge. So yes, so he's trying to bring about a new science in philosophy to determine the possibility, the principles. So the possibility is basically the characteristic of experience, empirical experience. The possibility is where you can make guesses about the nature of the world around you, and that is basically like grounded in empiricism and what reason or reason can tell about the things that we can know about the world. And then the principles are basically the ideas, which are ideas about objects which are not dependent on empirical experience, and and the extent of all a priori knowledge. The extent he talks about the extent when he talks about nothingness and even the dialectic. When he gets into the dialectic, as opposed to analytic, he tries to explain where is the limit of a priori knowledge, and that is in nothingness and even the dialectic. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think like pretty much I think after, like in the introduction, when he's also bringing this distinction in a priori knowledge and a posterior knowledge, and where he's also where he's giving us the certain examples as to how is it that what are these propositions, what would you consider an analytic proposition to be, a synthetic proposition to be, and for him, like in the analytic if the proposition is in the form of subject and predicate form, the analytic, the predicate is already contained within the subject. So
Yes. And there is this principle of non-contradiction, that there is no predicate which stands against the subject. So in the analytic is concerned more about the non-contradictory judgments or propositions about the nature of the object. And then judgment is free from that when you go to dialectic. So
and he's also in that distinction, he also brings in some understanding about mathematics as being a priori synthetic, because for him the act of counting itself is synthetic rather. So he mentions that 7 plus 5 equals 12. At first it seems like a analytic proposition, but rather what happens is that the resultant of 7 plus 5, which is 12, is not contained within either of the numbers, and also the addition of. So you have to actually take into account intuition in this sense also. So through intuition you are counting, and then you have come with the result of 12. So
yes. It's interesting in schema he says that we will discuss that later, but in schema he says the quantity the schema of quantity is numbers, and schema is in any way like dependent on sensibility. So mathematics is not purely synthetic, it's also analytic. So, yeah. And then we go to fourth, the distinction between analytic and synthetic judgments. I think we already covered that now. Between analytic and synthetic. In all theoretical sciences of reason, synthetic a priori judgments are contained as principles. So in all theoretical sciences of reason, synthetic a priori judgments are contained as principles. So he means to say that in theoretical sciences, reason is contained in principles, which has nothing to do with sensibility, and it's not analytic. And yeah, so and do you have anything to say about this?
We mentioned analytic judgments, and he says in brackets, so this is A7. And he says analytic judgments are therefore those in which the connection of the predicate with the subject is thought through identity. Those in which this connection is thought without identity should be entitled synthetic.
Yes.
That's the crucial distinction
between analytic and synthetic.
And yeah, he tries to like explicate the whole thing further, and tries to bring judgments into this within this domain. And
judgments are like analytic, the predicates which can be objectively verified to be true.
Yeah. And he says judgments of experience as, so this is page 49b12 in the first line of the second verse. It's called judgments of experience as such are one and all synthetic, for it would be absurd to found an analytic judgment on experience. So and like this line is kind of and this is where he's breaking away from his predecessors, which is that because they would consider analytic judgments to be sufficient enough as being, as being judgments that would testify for existence. So that's why he says for it, judgments of experience are one and all synthetic, for it would be absurd to found an analytic judgment on experience. So
yes, on experience itself, because analytic judgments are true irrespective of any proof. Synthetic judgments require objective proofs. So yes,
because analytic judgments wouldn't they wouldn't even demand for experience. Like for them, it's rather that their proof only is on the basis of being non-contradictory.
And exactly, like even space and time, there's no question about the existence of space and time. They are just given.
Yes, yeah, which is going to come in the next part. That's where he and because even in that there is this debate over space and time, whether they exist independently, and he tries to, of course, argue against that.
Okay, then next we go to 6.6, the general problem of pure reason. Yes, so maybe, yeah, the general problem of pure reason is that it's not contained within the domain of pure understanding. In order to be validated, it has to have the support from the pure concepts of understanding, which is through synthesis, and then synthesis happens through spontaneity, and spontaneity depends on sensibility, and then which in turn depends on space and time. So the problem of pure reason is that it can't be contained in one domain. Yes. Okay, so let's go to the 7th. The idea and division of a special science under the title Critique of Pure Reason. Okay. So now we go to the Transcendental Doctrine of Elements. Transcendental Aesthetic. Okay. Transcendental is, for me, this domain of possibilities. And aesthetic is everything which relates to the senses, and senses in the sense the empirical experience. So transcendental aesthetic is basically what you can guess about the nature of the objects which are given to you in empirical experience, which is through space and time. The predispositions that we have about the nature of the object which is given to us, space and time. Yes, and we have transcendental aesthetic, space and time.
Yeah.
And then in the second part, we have transcendental logic, introduction, idea of transcendental logic. So,
so here in this page 66, and so he gives this footnote about transcendental aesthetic.
I think we can. I think I have a yes. We can discuss the first few paragraphs.
Yeah.
Let me get to that page. Yes, the first few pages are like instrumental in getting the essence of the book. Okay. Page view.
So I think it's page 65, I think.
Okay. Yes. Page. We can start at page 41. I think it's B1, A1.
Okay. From A1. Okay.
Yeah. So it's 63. Yes, 63. The idea of transcendental philosophy. Experience is beyond all doubt the first product to which our understanding gives rise in working up the raw material of sensible impressions. So experience.
Still not able to find the page.
Okay, the first page, the first ever page. It is introduction, the distinction between pure and empirical knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of transcendental philosophy.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how he explains the word experience as the experiencer is basically the entity which receives sensible impressions. So it's interesting how he gives a definition of experience. It's very difficult to find philosophers who actually explain the word experience and how they understand it. So this is a very important definition. And then he goes on to say experience is therefore our first instruction, and in its progress is so inexhaustible in new information that in the interconnected lives of all future generations, there will never be any lack of any new knowledge that can be thus ingathered.
Yeah.
So basically he says that to experience we can know about the world through experience and through impressions. Without these impressions, all knowledge is blind and all concepts are empty. Yeah. Interesting.
And it is also something which is it is also a sort of a position also, because 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 the opposite view of this could be that that the experience is nothing but, say, it only serves you to say to it only serves you to look more inside your rational thoughts, in sense that like, because over here he's trying to put experience as that because without experience, like this knowledge process won't be able to happen. Then
yes, knowledge starts in experience, which is empirical experience, and then he builds this whole theory from starting from the basic, starting from the body in a sense. Space and time, in some sense, like they signify the body in some sense. Because when he initially describes space and time, he describes space and time in a manner which is like a container which can contain manifold in the sense order of representations. Space and time, space is the container and time is the in the sense the size of the container, because time signifies the replicability and coexistence and succession. So yes, and there's another sentence where he defines a priori and a posteriori. Experience tells us indeed what is, but not that it must necessarily be so and not otherwise. So experience, but only with experience we can't really know what is true and what is not true. So this is where he he says that experience is not sufficient because it doesn't give us the apodictic certainty regarding the knowledge that we are receiving or that is given to us. It therefore gives us no true universality, and reason, which is so insistent upon this kind of knowledge, is therefore more stimulated by it than satisfied. So reason is never satisfied with experience. Reason is this universality, and experience cannot afford us the universality. So reason is in like disagreement in some sense with experience. Such universal modes of knowledge, which at the same time possess the character of inner necessity, must in themselves, independent of experience, be clear and certain. So yes, he is basically advocating knowledge independent of experience, even though he acknowledges that experience is where everything starts, and then he goes on to say that they are therefore entitled knowledge a priori, and whereas on the other hand, that which is borrowed solely from experience is, as we say, known only a posteriori or empirically. So there's a clear distinction that he makes.
There is a
Anything that we can know independent of experience is a priori, and anything which can be borrowed or got directly from empiricism is posteriori. So there's a clear distinction that he makes.
Yeah. He. I mean, he begins with experience as being something which also provides us with this knowledge, but he says that, but we also know of there being something a priori, something which universal, which the experience of does not provide us with. And yeah, and but of course, it's not a division that cannot be reconciled with. I mean, his entire thing is that it can be reconciled, and
Yes.
but this is a distinction which is very important.
Yes. To start with, like initially in transcendental aesthetic, he makes a clear distinction, and then later on, when we get to the deductions, when we get to the principles, even though reason does not come in contact with sensibility, principles and the pure concepts of understanding which relate sensibility and reason surely bring about a unity between the pure, the a priori and posteriori. So, so we can move on to, yes, you can. Then I see this on page 43, B, I think B3, below B3. We are in possession of certain modes of a priori knowledge, and even the common understanding is never without them. So he's saying there are certain aspects of knowledge which give us certainty and necessity and apodictic certainty, and that's common understanding has within it a priori knowledge, and that is what he's trying to extract from it. So so basically anything which is necessary and universal and apodictic is pure and a priori. Anything else is really not interesting to him.
Yeah, he says here. So once again, so in that page only 43, and at the very end he says. So before that he's saying first, then we if we have a proposition which in being thought is thought as necessary, it is an a priori judgment, and so forth. He says secondly, experience never confers on its judgments true or strict, but only assumed and comparative universality through induction. So there is a difference in the mode, and which is something which he brings up in dialectic also, right? When he's talking about the role of reason. that it's that it's based on deduction. And over here he's making that distinct, and over here I think we can probably see the origin of that sort of an argument. So like comparative universality is basically you are looking at all these different instances that are happening in the world, and then through this process of induction, which is that you are finding out all these different similarities, and then you're coming to a certain universal principle on the basis of that, rather than say on the a priori nature of knowledge, where it is based on necessity. Yeah.
Yes. He says here on 45, such a priori origin is manifest in certain concepts, no less than in judgments. If we remove from our empirical concept of a body one by one every feature in it which is merely empirical, the color, the hardness, the softness, the weight, even the impenetrability, there still remains the space which the body now entirely vanished occupied, and this cannot be removed. Again, if we remove from our empirical concept of any object, corporeal or incorporeal, all properties which experience has taught us, we yet cannot take away that property through which the object is thought as substance or as inhering in a substance. Although this concept of substance is more determinate than that of an object in general, owing therefore to the necessity with which this concept of substance forces itself upon us, we have no option save to admit that it has its seat in our faculty of a priori knowledge. So,
and this is also something which reflects in his introduction in the Transcendental Aesthetic, where he's trying to show where how on what basis is that he's trying to say space and time are a priori, and then this is what he is trying to show us, which is that there are these a priori and origins that cannot completely vanish, even if you remove certain properties.
Exactly. If you remove empirical, that is the color or the hardness or softness, or these qualities of objects are empirical, but underneath the empirical there is a priori, which cannot be completely removed, even if you remove the sensible qualities of an object. Basically the ability to even experience anything is a priori, irrespective of what is experienced and what is not experienced. Like that which is experienced is empirical because it has a certain quality, but underneath that quality there is yes, underneath the quality there is a priori, which is space and time initially for him, and then yes, you can go on. Yes, and then he says philosophy stands. Yeah, I think the same. We can move on.
Yeah. So, like in the last line, he says in that paragraph only, he says, owing therefore to the necessity with which this you already read it out, right? Like owing therefore to the necessity with which this concept of substance forces upon itself upon us, we have no option save to admit that it has. Yeah, so it's basically out of necessity again in this case, and that's why it is a priori once again. So it's so there is, I mean, it's a premature thing. It's a premature judgment to come upon. But for me, I think there is this clear division between thinking of reason as, say, walking through the process of deduction, and in terms of experience as that which you do it through induction. And if I'm not wrong, I'm not sure if I'm right about this, but he's following probably whatever he has learned in logic, like during that time. And yeah, I'm not too entirely sure about the history of that, but maybe.
I think somewhere he gives a definition for what logic is supposed to be before talking about transcendental logic or general knowledge, general logic. He says general logic is analytic because the predicate always is in agreement with the subject. So basically, analytic is whatever you can think about an object which is yet to be experienced. The predispositions are always going to be true. But transcendental logic is that which explores the possibilities, that which gives more freedom to the predicate. The predicate need not agree with the subject at all times. And that's where we get to the transcendental dialectics and things like that. So in page 65, we have transcendental. I think we have gone through the rest of the things. I think the only important distinction is between pure and posterior, like experience, the concepts, or that is initially important. And then we, on page 65, transcendental doctrine of elements, transcendental aesthetic. Yes, we can, I think here is where he lays out on the initial introduction. In whatever manner and by whatever means the mode of knowledge may relate to objects, intuition is that through which it is in immediate relation to them, and from which all thought gains its material. This is very interesting, and this is, I think, instrumental, because he says that all modes, like objects, there has to be intuition first, and then objects have to appear in intuition first, and then only thought is possible. In the sense, without intuition, thoughts are meaningless. Thoughts do not gain their material without intuition. Thoughts, so objects appear first in intuition, and then they go to the thoughts. So, but intuition takes place only insofar as the object is given to us. So intuition is possible only when we are in contact with an object in sense. This again is only possible to man, at least insofar as the mind is affected in a certain way. So intuition is the change that one experiences when one is in interaction with the object in the external world. The capacity, the receptivity for receiving representations through the mode in which we are affected by objects is entitled sensibility. Yes, so basically we can, for Kant, a person or a man or an entity who experiences is the capacity, basically the capacity to receive things, which is called receptivity. So that is the primary characteristic of an entity who is in experience. Objects are given to us by means of sensibility, and it alone yields us intuition. So without sensibility, there is no intuition, and then without intuition, there is no thought. They are thought through the understanding, and from the understanding arise concepts. So there's this chain. So we have an object in the external world, and then we have sensibility in which we are affected by the object, in the sense we receive that which we can, the impressions, we receive the impressions in sensibility, and then that leads to intuitions, and then through intuition thought is possible, and then in the domain of thought we can think about objects which are not given to us in experience, which is concepts. So there's this chain. So, but all thought must directly or indirectly, by way of certain characters, relate ultimately to intuitions, and therefore with us to sensibility, because in no other way can an object be given to us. So yes, he says you can't think about an object unless it is given to it through intuition. The effect of an object upon the faculty of representation, so far as we are affected by it, is sensation. Yes, the effect, the physical effect. I think he's talking about the physical effect of an object, which is through the senses. It could be color or smell or taste or whatever. So that effect, once the effect has been impinged upon the experiencer, that event is called sensation, and then that intuition which is in relation to the object through sensation is entitled empirical. So that aspect of the object is empirical. The undetermined object of an empirical intuition is entitled appearance. Yes, so here appearance is what we are working with.
Yeah.
And everything, the certainty about the nature of the world is determined through this thing that we call appearance, that which is obtained through intuition and sensibility. But in the appearance which corresponds to sensation, I term its matter. Yes, so that material, that thing that we receive from the object in the external world is matter. So it's very drastically different from how how matter is defined. So matter is that quality which is received from the object through receptivity, through sensibility. But that which so determines the manifold of appearance that it allows of being ordered in certain relations, I term the form of appearance. So the order of matter is form.
Yeah. And over here, like in the way he's also defining intuition, it is also a way in which knowledge is also being understood, because like in I think if I could bring Howard's notes in this, is because he said knowledge, I think over here is like, it's like being tied to it. So which means that knowledge in the sense is very reciprocal. So it just cannot be this. It cannot just stand on any one thing. Like it just cannot stand on intuition or on rational thought. It has to be tied.
Yes.
And
yes, there is no complete domain. There is no complete domain for knowledge. Knowledge is everywhere, and through knowledge we can make judgments. And yes.
Yeah, it has to
be pure or empirical or. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, as you have mentioned, also it has like without sensibility, there won't be any knowledge, and without any say concepts, there won't be knowledge in that sense, So yeah, I mean, there is this mutuality between those two, and in that sense, knowledge is being defined like that. So
yes. Yes, and then we have that in which alone the sensations can be posited and ordered in a certain form cannot itself be sensation. Yes, so in sensation there is no ordering of matter. There is no form. Sensation only has matter, and then the ordering of that matter received through sensibility doesn't happen in sensation. It happens in it happens elsewhere through judgment, because order presupposes that there's an element of time. So time, although time is part of sensibility, but the ordering, as we will see in the synthesis, the ordering happens in synthesis, not in
yes.
So, and therefore, while the matter of all appearance is given to us a posteriori only, its form must lie ready for the sensations a priori in the mind, and so must allow of being considered apart from all sensation. So the order is not in the sense contained within sensation. It has to be in the mind before the sensations happen. So that order is in the sense the receptivity. The order is the predispositions that we have regarding the nature of the world. So yes, I term all
And
sensations.
yeah, I also I also was, because when I first came across this passage, I was a bit I was like sort of confused, because the thing is that, okay, like, even whatever I say, whatever I gather from the intuition also, it's not like it is in complete disorder. Like there is some sort of a semblance, and I can recognize that. Okay, maybe there's some order that is coming in, but then I think that I like the way I've sort of understood is that there is a preference being given to a priori, in the sense, like, the form that the form of appearance is now being determined through a priori, because mm, because maybe it is due to the operations that is happening through the a priori that we can only explain the form of an appearance with the, and it is something which we probably cannot do through, say, the sensibility. And
Exactly. Sensibility has a ways order of matter, order of appearances, and then yeah, that's the basic distinction between, let's say, a a chair which cannot think. A chair can only receive effect from the outside world, but it cannot think. It cannot presuppose the order of experience, order of sensations or effects. It is only through, it's like saying, we perform predictive processing upon ourselves, and then we look forward to experience only specific kind of experiences and not every kind of experience. So this form or the order of matter must lie ready for the sensations. This form or order exists even before there is sensation. So it's even though the mechanism which leads to that group of predispositions or order is not clear. I think ultimately this is what Kant is trying to do. How is it that we can have predispositions about the nature of the world? How is it that we can look forward to experiencing something even before it happens to us? So these a priori rules within the mind are produced in the mind, not in sensation. Sensation is just, if we were to think that humans are only sensations, we would be reduced to tables and chairs, because tables and chairs do not react. They only they can only store the effects that are impinged upon them. They cannot think about the kind of experiences that they could have in the future, in the sense. So I term all representations pure in the transcendental sense, in which there is nothing that belongs to sensation. So yes, the pure representations are not the representations which belong to the sensation. This is his major distinction. The pure form of sensible intuition in general, in which all the manifold of intuition is intuited in certain relations, must be found in the mind a priori. Yes. So this pure representations or pure knowledge or pure understanding is produced within the mind. It is not received as sensual intuition. And this pure form of sensibility may also itself be called pure intuition. Yes. So intuition, apart from empiricism or empirical knowledge, is pure intuition. If then I take away from the representation of a body that which the understanding thinks in regard to it, substance, force, divisibility, etc., and likewise what belongs to sensation, penetrability, hardness, color, etc., something still remains over from this empirical intuition, namely extension and figure. These belong to pure intuition, which even without any actual object of the senses or of sensation exists in the mind a priori as a mere form of sensibility. So with these two mere concepts, extension and figure, extension in the sense space, and figure is like there's an element of order and figure, I suppose. So extension and figure is basically what gives 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 rise to the pure intuition, gives rise to the transcendental aesthetic. These are two characteristics of intuition which are pure. All other things like substance, force, penetrability, hardness, color, all these are empirical, and underneath all that is extension and figure. So in transcendental aesthetic is trying to explain what these could be. So yes, with that to do that he uses the concepts of space and time.
Yeah, and it's also like and this can be, of course, there's obviously a continuation of the previous paragraph, but it's also like trying to show us why even through this way in which he has sort of excluded all these different empirical aspects in a body, and he's also trying to show this through this negation, that even through this negation I can still find an order, and that cannot be found in the empirical, because I've cleared out all the empirical determinations, and all that is left now is
pure
yeah. And I mean, it's I don't know, I cannot debate with this also, but it's interesting what he does.
Yes, because you see impenetrability and hardness and color, there are many types of hardnesses, there are many types of colors. There could be many ways of seeing something, like the visual appearance of things can be manifold. Like there can be hundreds of colors, there can be hundreds of ways we can understand softness, hardness, impenetrability. We can understand force in different ways, we can understand divisibility in different ways, we can understand substances in different ways. But underlying all these underlying all these qualities, so these aspects which we call empirical are pertaining to the quality of an object. But extension and figure means that extension and figure are the qualities of all objects, not one specific object. So extension means an object occupies a space, and figure means the in the sense the basic form of an object which cannot help you determine whether it is this or that object. Figure in the sense is shape. So in describing shape, in describing time, Kant also explains that time is basically the shape of an object, and space is basically the size of an object. So so these are the two. So it could be many objects, like every object has two things in common, which is extension and figure. So this is why he thinks that these are the two pure qualities of an object, as opposed to the other qualities which can differ in every object. In the sense, you can say it's like the scan of all objects that exist. When you scan every object, you have this element which is common in all objects. So, and then we go to the science of all principles of a priori sensibility, I call transcendental aesthetic. Yes, so all that which we can understand about objects, irrespective of their specificity, like irrespective of the color, irrespective of the the specific texture of objects or other aspects. There are certain a priori qualities which are common for all objects, and this is the domain which is going to define the transcendental aesthetic, and that is what he wants to focus on.
Yep.
There must be such a science forming the first part of the transcendental doctrine of elements, in distinction from that part which deals with the principles of pure thought and which is called transcendental logic. So transcendental aesthetic is the aesthetic through so what can you know about objects in general, which is aesthetic, is transcendental aesthetic, and then transcendental logic is what you can predict about that object, about objects in general, transcendental logic. In transcendental aesthetic, we shall therefore first isolate sensibility. So yes, so he basically wants to isolate sensibility by taking away from it everything which the understanding thinks through its concepts, so that nothing may be left save empirical intuition. So he wants to take away the concepts which can define all objects in general from the empirical intuition. He wants to isolate sensibility. Secondly, we shall also separate off from it everything which belongs to sensation, so that nothing may remain save pure intuition and the mere form of appearances, which is all that sensibility can supply a priori. So appearance is an a priori quality which is used to understand about the object, free from sensibility. In the
is a form of the appearance, right?
Form, which is the order of appearances as well.
The order of appearance, yeah.
Yeah, form of appearance is like the order of representations. So representation is appearance. In the course of this investigation, it will be found that there are two pure forms of sensible intuition serving as principles of a priori knowledge, namely space and time. To the consideration of these, we shall now proceed. So yes, so basically the gist of this entire first chapter, I think we have tried to capture by saying that he tries to tackle the problem, which is basically how do I understand all objects as opposed to one or specific one or other kind of object. Like in the sense he's saying, I'm not interested in the qualities of a specific object, like its color, its aesthetic appearance. I'm more interested in how it appears in general, like all objects in general. So all objects in general have the quality of extension and figure, which can be, in the sense, subsumed. That quality can be subsumed under the concept of space and time, because space means that something has a size, something can occupy space, and then figure is like something has a shape, and then that shape can be reproduced and produced because there is order to it. So
I was also thinking of shape in the sense of configuration, in the because a shape can be understood as being composed of many different parts, and how they are, say, related to one another, and
yes.
only through a succession can I understand
Exactly
shape.
Yes. So for instance, if I draw a straight line on a board, the straight line you won't be able to understand this the figure as a straight line unless you make reference to the background of the board on which I'm drawing. So shape, you cannot understand the shape of one entity if you can't use another shape as a reference to compare it with. So this is where abstraction comes into the picture, and this is where time is very important. Time in its usual sense is not the signifier of succession or passage of something. Time is also abstract in this sense. So so space is that domain of containment of representations, and then time is like time is this domain of abstractions. How can you abstract away the qualities of that which is contained in it by giving it order and by giving it this quality of succession. Succession is basically, without succession you can't have the idea of shape, because when you understand a shape, you have to have an order of an order, because you start from a certain point and then you draw a shape. So when you start somewhere, you start the order, so that the starting point of a shape is like the starting point of time, and then when you complete the picture, it means that you have successfully undergone succession, and then in succession lies the abstraction. So yes, the transcendental aesthetic, section 1, space metaphysical exposition of this concept. Yes, so he basically says, by means of our of outer sense, a property of our mind, we represent to ourselves objects as outside us and all without exception in space. In space, their shape, magnitude, and relation to one another are determined or determinable in a sense, by means of which the mind intuits itself or its inner state yields indeed no intuition of the soul itself as an object, but there is nevertheless a determinate form, namely time. So here, yes, he says form is time, in which alone the intuition of inner states is possible, and everything which belongs to inner determination is therefore represented in relation to time. Time cannot be outwardly intuited any more than space can be intuited as something in us. So space is something which is outside. Space, yes, space is not something which is outside, because there is no continuity between there's no lack of continuity. There is no lapse in the connection of my body to the object's body. So space is always going to be something which is internal. It's like soul. So that's why he makes reference to the soul. Space is like soul, because space there's always a continuity between the space which occupies my body and the space that occupies the object's body. So space is never separate from, it's not out there. Whereas time is both inner and external, because it has an order. So time is not space bound to space. It is something which is beyond space. So it is both the inner faculty of the mind as well as the external, which is the faculty of the object as well, because form or order or the shape of the object exists in the object as opposed to existing within the experiences. So in that sense, he is basically saying that space exists within an individual, and it cannot, there's nothing, like there's no space outside. Everything exists inside, because there's no lapse in the continuity between between the space which occupies my body and the space which occupies the object. So space is purely internal. Time is both internal and external, because it informs us, since the object is within us. Time defines the form of the object, the shape of the object. It means that time is internal to us, as well as which is given to us through experience. So basically, yes.
So the way I understood this para was this distinction between outer sense and inner sense, and at the outer sense, he says, a property of our mind, we represent to ourselves objects as outsiders, and all without exception. And it's for me, I think when I read this, I thought, okay, I think there is this that space has to do with something in relation to things that are outside us, and time as the form of the appearance of the object. And do you think that it is because when I read this, I felt like there's this distinction in that sense, as space as being part of the outer sense and time as being part of the inner sense.
Yes, but initially here he's saying he's giving a general understanding of space. He says by means of outer sense, a property of our mind, we represent to ourselves objects as outside us. So he says objects exist outside us. This is the general idea that we have. But later on, he gives reason to believe that space is not something that exists outside. It's something that is continuous between the experiencer and the object. So it's
Okay,
in a state, in a
in
sense.
that sense, it will stay inside. Yeah.
And then since there is order to the object, the order, and since the order is not like this basic, like this general quality of an object which applies to all objects, it could be said that
It could be.
so with the concept of space, he establishes that the object is not outside the experiencer. The object is within the experiencer. But since there can be many orders to the object, the object can appear in different forms, different shapes, different orders, and it is given to us. It could be said that time is both internal and external, internal and outside, internal in inner sense and outside, outer sense. So time cannot be outwardly intuited any more than space can be intuited as something in us. So I think he defines. So this is what he thinks is the general idea. So he's explaining now. Now he's
this is the general idea.
Yeah. So now he's going to question why it is like that.
Yeah.
What then are space and time? Are they real existences? Are they only determinations or relations of things, yet such as would belong to things even if they were not intuited? So this is how he's going to question, and then he's going to come to the conclusion that space is necessary a priori representation which underlies all outer intuitions. We can never represent to ourselves the absence of space, though we can quite well think it as empty of objects. Space is inner to us. Even space exists even if there is no object.
Yeah.
So objects are given to us in space, and space is not outside to us. So this is why Kant is like the proponent of idealism, because idealism says that everything there's no object which is outside me. Everything is within me. So this is where idealism is important. It must therefore be regarded as the condition of the possibility of appearances and not as a determination dependent upon them. So yeah, space is not dependent upon the appearances because space already exists, and appearances just superimpose upon space, and then they are perceived by the mind. It is an a priori representation which necessarily underlies outer appearances. So space is okay. Fourth point: space is represented as an infinite given magnitude. It is given. It's not something that we perceive. Space is already given before perception. And then
before that, he says, in the third point, he says space is essentially one, the manifold in it, and therefore the general concepts of spaces depend solely on the introduction of limitations. Hence, it follows that an a priori and not an empirical intuition underlies all concepts of space. So it is it is because it is due to the limitations that it is that it is able to that is able to like those limitations, something which are not coming from something which is empirical, but rather it is a priori.
No, I
And
don't think
that is
so.
some.
I don't think it's the limitation is imposed by empirical, because he says space
Yeah,
is
it's.
essentially one. So space is essentially one. So space, there is space. Within space, everything exists, like the perceiver and the object, everything. And the manifold in it, and therefore the general concept of spaces depends solely on limitation. So he says the concept of space can be limitations, but space itself, there is no limit to space itself as an entity. Or the general concept of space means this space and that space can exist, but there is only one space within which all this and that spaces exist. So the limitation is on the concept, not the space itself. The concept of
Right, yeah.
space is different from space.
Mhm.
Hence, it follows that an a priori and not an empirical intuition underlies all concepts of space. So a priori, space is that a priori which underlies all the concepts of space. Of course, there can be spaces, this space, that space, but something that which necessarily represents extension is space. And all other concepts of space are like saying there are different shapes and different sizes, which is entirely dependent on the object. So yeah, for kindred reasons, geometrical propositions that, for instance, in a triangle, two sides together are greater than the third can never be derived from the general concepts of line and triangle, but only from intuition, and this indeed a priori with apodictic certainty. So we can know about a triangle only when it is given to us through intuition. Yes, and then we can make judgment about how two lines can. Yeah, we can judge that two sides are greater than the third. We can judge this only in intuition. Space. Yes, so space is represented as an infinite given magnitude. It's infinite. Space is that infinite given within which all other spaces exist. So the transcendental exposition of concept of space. Yes. So here in this, he explains space in more detail. I think we have covered most of it. And then we go to transcendental aesthetic about time.
And he comes to conclusions also.
We can, okay, conclusions. Okay, space does not represent any property of things in themselves, nor does it represent them in their relation to one another. So yes, space is not this space or that space. Space is that continuity that given. So it has nothing to do with the property of things. The size of an object is not dependent on space. It is just a variant of space. So space is nothing but the form of all appearances of outer sense. Yes, it is the subjective condition of sensibility under which alone outer intuition is possible for us. Yes, so it's the a priori before there is any sensibility or intuition of an object. It is therefore solely for human standpoint that we can speak of space, of extended things, etc. If we depart from the subjective condition under which alone we can have outer intuition, namely liability to be affected by objects, the representation of space stands for nothing whatsoever. Yes, so space has no representation in the outside world, because there's no outside world if you think in terms of space, because the experiencer, who is the person, and the object both lie in the same uh, in the sense domain, same continuity. So there is no representation of space as such in the outside world, because there is no outside. And then we go to, yes, we can go to this. We assert then the empirical reality of space as regards all possible outer experience, and yet at the same time we assert its transcendental ideality. In other words, that it is nothing at all. Immediately we withdraw the above condition, namely its limitation to possible experience, and so look upon it as something that underlies things in themselves. So all things in themselves, all objects are in space, including the perceiver, including the entity who is perceiving. So there's this transcendental ideality. And then he says, with the sole exception of space, there is no subjective representation referring to something outer, which could be entitled objective a priori. So in terms of space, there's no such thing as outer.
Yeah. I think it comes to time.
Yes. Yeah, we can metaphysical exposition of the concept of time. Time is not an empirical concept that has been derived from any experience. Yes. So he says it's not just like space. Time is not an empirical concept. It's not like color. It's not like the softness or hardness of things. It's something which is prior to empirical. For neither coexistence nor succession would ever come into our perception if the representation of time were not presupposed as underlying them a priori. So we can't even perceive something as coexisting or something existing one after another without the concept of time. So time is that quality of the individual to ascertain that there is a change, or to ascertain that there is continuity or order or change. So time is that basic quality which helps us understand that something exists in relation to something else. Time is the necessary representation that underlies all intuitions. We cannot, in respect of appearances in general, remove time itself, though we can quite well think time as void of appearances. So time is basically the order. So that's what he's trying to explain here. Time is therefore given a priori. In it alone is actuality of appearance possible at all. You're saying something?
Oh, no.
And then there are.
Third point, he says the possibility of apodictic principles concerning the relations of time or of axioms of time in general is also grounded upon this a priori necessity. Time has only one dimension. Different times are not simultaneous but successive, just as different spaces are not successive but simultaneous. These principles cannot be derived from experience. For experience would give neither strict universality nor we should only be able to say that common experience teaches us that it is so, not that it must be so. These principles are valid as rules under which alone experiences are possible, and they instruct us in regard to the experiences, not by any. And
Time is that thing that brings necessity into the picture. And
yeah, I think the next one was there's one part, I think, in the conclusions from these concepts. And in 77, like point B, he says time is nothing but the form of inner sense, that is of the intuition of ourselves and of our inner state, which was already covered. It cannot be a determination of our outer appearances. It has to do neither with shape nor position, but with the relation of representations in our inner state. And just because this inner state, inner intuition yields no shape, we endeavor to make up for this want by, And this is where analogies and analogies come in. We represent the time sequence by a line progressing to infinity, in which the manifold constitutes a series of one-dimensional only. And we reason from the properties of this line to all the properties of time, with this one exception, that while the parts of the line are simultaneous, the parts of time are always, from this fact also, that all the relations of time allow of being expressed in an outer intuition. It is evident that representation is itself an intuition. Yeah, I think you were saying something.
Yes, so it's like time is like the simultaneity in line is in the sense time itself, time successiveness of time. We can find the successiveness of time in the simultaneity of a line. Line in the sense, if you keep drawing a line, it means that there is succession in time. So this analogy is very important that he makes here. Between time and lines.
And it's also very interesting in the sense, like because usually because it's like this dimensional way of looking at it, of looking at time, isn't it? Because I don't know if during that time, during the 1700s or whatever, like whether they were thinking of time in this way, as a dimension, as something which is moving through. But he's defining it as something which is successive.
Yes. And simultaneous. Yes, he is. Yeah, time. Yes, this analogy is also very, very interesting, because he brings in this this idea of dimension and into the picture using just time. He's not even talking about the point here, point and then line. He's just saying in drawing a line, there is time. You can find successiveness of time, which is so this pretty interesting. And I think we have come to the conclusion. Maybe if we have covered space and time, I think everything else is
because I think in the elucidation, it's he's trying to argue against those who say that space and time are objective.
Yes, exactly. But I think we are only concerned about what he's saying. Maybe his reply to others doesn't matter in his theory, because yes, I think if we are convinced, then I think yes. So the conclusion of transcendental aesthetic. We can go to the last thing here. Then, in pure a priori intuition, space and time, we have one of the factors required for solution of the general problem of transcendental philosophy. How are synthetic a priori judgments possible? So he's trying to find out an answer to this question: how are synthetic a priori judgments possible? How can we explain about thinking and thoughts and everything else just using the a priori judgments? To frame judgments, of course, he uses the categories whose origin he doesn't explicitly explain, but Yes, when in a priori judgment we seek to go out beyond the given concept, we come in the a priori intuitions upon that which cannot be discovered in the concept, but which is certainly found a priori in the intuition corresponding to the concept and can be connected with it synthetically. So synthesis is where everything
Yeah.
lies. A priori, he has located a priori in space and time, and then he uses the a priori synthetically to frame judgments about how the world is the way it is. And then his intention is to keep away from sensibility. Such judgments, however, thus based on intuition, can never extend beyond objects of senses. They are valid only for objects of possible experience. So these judgments, yes. So initially, these judgments that he's trying to frame initially should apply. Then it's the basic condition is that it should apply to objects of possible experience. Only when the judgments apply to the objects of possible experience that the objectivity can be established about the judgments are basically guesses. So judgments, we cannot know if a judgment or a guess about the nature of an object in the outside world is true or not unless it applies to those objects. And then how it is applied is in the realm of possible experiences, which he will do in the deductions.
Yeah.
I think we have about logic, and I think this is self-explanatory. If we come, I think space and time was the most instrumental, and then he explains analytic and dialectic logic and general logic, in the sense how can we even predict about things.
Yeah.
Yes. And then yes, I think we have covered most of it.
Yeah.
I think we can end it now.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
And we can next time we'll probably begin with.
I will end it now. We can carry on the conversation later.
Yeah.